Hi everyone, Leah here from EurekaCrystalBeads.com with another fun beading video for you. Before I get started, just a quick reminder to go check out the rest of our channel. And if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button and that notification bell, and you'll always know when we're posting new content. Today's bracelet is a really fun, romantic looking design called the Sweetheart Bracelet. And it features some Swarovski crystal in the shape of hearts pendants right there. And that's going to make this beautiful for Valentine's Day. But we will talk about some other options for you that will certainly make it relevant for other times of the year as well. So you don't have to just be boxed into wearing this around Valentine's Day. All right, so let's go over everything that we're going to be using here. Let's start off by looking at the base of our bracelet. This is going to be Rolo chain, which if you've never worked with Rolo chain before, it's my favorite style of chain to use for many projects, but specifically bracelets. Because of the way the links sit, it's really easy to determine the spacing of your little dangles, as well as making sure that they all sit in the right direction so they lay nicely on the wrist. We also have here a lobster claw clasp. And if you have trouble with lobster claws, this one I particularly like because it's a little more rounded. So it's a bit easier to put on yourself, which I'm sure is the thing that we all struggle with most with lobster claws. But we do like them because they're so secure. Next, we have these stars of the show. I have two different Swarovski components here. I have some 6mm bicones. These are in rose shimmer, which if you've never seen the shimmer finish in person, it's really beautiful. It's a bit different than an AB finish. It flashes a lot more blue and purple. It's really, really stunning. And then of course we have these Swarovski crystal heart pendants. And these are in crystal AB, which of course, such a classic finish. From one side, you see a lot more gold and yellow, and from the back side, you see a bit more blue flash. It's the most versatile finish I think they make, and I think it's going to pair lovely because the blue that's flashing on the hearts is going to be picked up on the bluey purple that's in the bicones. Okay, and lastly, we have the rest of our components here, which are some 1-inch head pins and some 6mm jump rings. Now, if you want more detailed descriptions of everything I'm using here, we're going to link you below to every single thing that I've used, and it will take you right to the Eureka Crystal Beads website if you'd like to purchase them and learn more about the actual products. As far as tools are concerned, first and foremost, we're going to be using our basic wire working 3, as I like to call them, our trifecta. We have our wire cutters here. These are our side cutters. These are meant for cutting hard wires, things like head pins or chain. We have our chain nose pliers. And these are flat inside and smooth, and they taper to a point. That is what makes them different than flat nose pliers. A little tip for the day if you didn't know that. And we have lastly our round nose pliers. These have no flat edges whatsoever. They're used to make round shapes or hold round shapes, and they are like 2 ice cream cones. And lastly, I am going to use a second pair of chain nose pliers. This is because we're using jump rings, and it's easiest to open jump rings when you have a pair of pliers in each hand. So if you ever want to know what tool you should have 2 of, it would be chain nose pliers, because sometimes what people tend to do is they use round nose pliers in their other hand to open jump rings, and what can happen is if you grip something too hard with round nose pliers, you can leave a dent because there's no flat edge. So I fully recommend 2 pairs of chain nose pliers for your toolbox, or at the very least, have your second pair be a pair of flat nose pliers, which come to a square tip. And the whole point is that you want a pair of pliers in each hand that have flatness inside so they don't dent your jump ring. But I do prefer chain nose because of that tapered point, and they get into smaller places a little nicer. So that is what I have multiples of in my own toolbox. All right, the last thing we're going to be using is some 24 gauge sterling silver wire. This is half hard round wire. We're going to be using this to attach our clasp to our chain, and it's going to make sure that everything is nice and secure and can't get pulled apart because I'm going to show you a little wrapping technique for attaching things to it. All right, let's get started. Okay, first of all, the amount of chain I'm starting with here is a foot. That is because this is how long this chain is sold by. It's sold by the foot. So we're going to have to cut this down. Otherwise, this is going to be a pretty long bracelet. So what I'm going to do is start by wrapping it around my wrist to get a general sense of how long I want my bracelet to be. Now, how long to make it is up to you. Some people like their bracelets a little tighter. Some people like their bracelets to dangle down over their hand a little looser. It's really your call. But what I do want to do is make sure that I take into account the fact that my clasp area is going to add some additional length. So because I don't like my bracelets too loose, I'm going to just make it meet on the underside of my wrist, knowing that my clasp is going to add just a little bit more, and that's going to make it fit perfectly. Use my cutters here to cut one of those links of chain. And you'll have some leftover chain here, of course. Great for making earrings, by the way. You can build some beads off of each side and then cut when you're ready at your finished length, attach them to some ear wires, and you have some beautiful dangly clustery earrings. So scrap pieces of chain are one of my favorite things to have left over at the end of any project, because I know I will always get use out of it. So I have a great little scrap chain bag that I keep at my own house. So now to attach the jump ring, we're going to do two things. We're going to make a little wired link using our 24 gauge wire here, and that's going to attach the chain to the loop of the clasp. As far as what the clasp will hook into, we're then going to make a link on the other side of the chain that will end up having a loop that your lobster claw here will clip onto. So 24 gauge wire is a great gauge wire to have on hand. It's really good for a lot of things, specifically things like this. So it's a good little bit of wire to keep on hand. So first thing we're going to do is take our chain nose pliers, and we're going to make a bend, 90-degree bend, about an inch or so, maybe inch and a quarter into our wire here. Now, if I go a little fast here for you, keep in mind, check out our YouTube channel. We have other videos that go over wire wrapping much more slowly and in depth. So I'll go probably a little bit faster than perhaps someone who's never done this before might like. But check out the rest of our channel. We have a lot of step-by-step, much slower videos on just how to wrap a loop. But that's what we're going to start with here. So I'm going to grab with my round nose pliers right pushed up into that corner that we made. And as far as where you hold it on your pliers, that determines how big your loop is going to be. We don't need an enormous loop, but we don't want a teeny tiny one either. So we want one that's going to be just big enough for this end link of chain to go into. So that actually doesn't have to be that big. So I'll just go just a little bit into the pliers. It also depends on the pair of pliers you have too. Some pairs of pliers are more petite than others. So I brought my wire up and over, wrapping it around the jaw of the pliers. But to keep going, I kind of have to shift my pliers out of the way to keep going and make that loop. Now, what you want to see when you're done is that you have that same 90-degree angle you started with. You just have a little loop up in the corner. And ideally, it should look kind of like a lollipop on top of a lollipop stick. Nice and centered. And that's basically what we have here. So now what we're going to do is take that end link of chain, and we're going to slide it and pop it right into that loop like a key onto a key ring. It'll spiral right into it. And now we go back to our chain nose. And if you're ever not sure what tool you should be using, keep in mind we've made our round shape. We're done with our round pliers. Everything else for gripping will be our chain nose, so we don't leave any dents in our jewelry making here. Okay, you're going to gently grab that loop there, and we're going to start to wrap our little tail of wire around our longer piece. Maintaining that 90-degree angle is what will give you nice, neat wraps. Go nice and slow. We're going to do about 2 wraps here. Just like that. Now we're going to snip off this little tail and use our chain nose pliers again to tuck in that little edge that's always left. It's always left behind that you can't quite, there we go, now you can see it, that you can't quite get off there. It's always important to make sure all sharp edges are tucked in, because you don't want them snagging on clothing or snagging on someone's skin. All right, so this is the start of the link that we're going to use. So now we have to create the other half that's going to attach to the loop of our lobster claw. And for that, we're going to wrap right over the wrap that we just created. And if you're not sure what I'm meaning, you'll see in a second. I'm going to very gently grab the wrap that I just made, and I'm going to bend a 90-degree angle coming out from the top of it. Just like this. Now we're going to make another loop. We're doing essentially the same steps we were just doing. Shift your pliers forward. You can roll your loop over if you have to make it look nice and centered. And this is what we have. So now we're going to slide the loop of our clasp onto the end of our wire. You might be wondering why I'm working with such a long piece of wire. Well, another little tip for you is that the longer the piece of wire you work with, if you're doing a bunch of consecutive little wraps, the less you'll waste, because that second tail of wire that you cut off, which will be this long piece here, is one long piece, and we'll immediately be starting from the beginning of it again when we go to use it for another project or another wire wrap of some kind, versus leaving just a short tail, and then you have a little tail that's too short to do anything with. So the longer the piece you can manage to work with, the more wire you will save. Now we're going to get in here with our chain nose. And I'm going to gently wrap my wire right over the wraps that are already there. Nice and neatly maintain that 90-degree angle. Just flip that chain out of the way as you go around. Okay, now we're going to snip off our nice long tail here. We'll be good to go for the other side when we go to do the next link. And of course, use your chain nose to tuck in any sharp edge that's left behind. And it takes very little pressure to do that, but just the right angle. And that can sometimes take a little bit of practice. So we have a little link here, and there's no pulling this apart. This is going to be a nice, strong way to have your bracelet attached together. So for the other side, I'm really just going to repeat the same exact steps. So I'm going to do it a little bit faster for you here. Make our 90-degree bend. Make our little loop. We're going to attach it here to the end of that chain, and we're going to wrap it shut, making sure to keep that tail of wire at a nice 90 degrees. Go about 2 wraps. If you go a wrap more, that's fine. It's not the end of the world if you do 3 wraps instead of 2. I would say between 2 and 3 is good. I tend to like 2 in this case because it's getting covered up anyway, and it tends to get a little bigger, so I like to start a little bit smaller first. Snip off that tail, nudge in that little sharp bit that's left behind. And now we're going to do the other side, gently grabbing on top of the wrap we just made. Bend your 90-degree. Grab your round nose. Now this loop we're going to make a little bit bigger because it's the loop that our lobster claw is going to hook into. So it's going to be a loop that's going to have more than just the function of keeping your bracelet pieces together. It's going to actually hold the bracelet onto your wrist, and it's going to make it easier for you to put your bracelet on. So we're going to go a little bit bigger. And then I have a surprise for you. We're going to wrap again. So we're going to have a nice little doubled loop here, which is going to be extra strong, and it's going to look extra nice. So we're going to wrap again. You're going to have to adjust your pliers a little bit as we go around. You can see that we're going around a double time. So we've gone around twice here. We're going to get a nice strong loop. Now, if your wire is a little springy and it kind of looks like one loop is bigger than the other, don't worry about that quite yet. Once we've wrapped it shut, we can adjust these loops because they feed one into the other, so we can adjust them. You're going to carefully grab it from the outside, and I know it's going to seem like you're going to squish it, but again, don't worry, we can neaten it up a bit. And you're going to use your tail to wrap over the first wrap that you did. Nice and neatly. Okay, so you can see how I've just wrapped right over the wrap that I had, like that. And if you need to neaten out these 2 loops here, my little trick is I get them onto the jaw of the round nose pliers, and I use my chain nose pliers to then just force them down a little bit. And that helps to neaten and tighten up those loops and make them a little more perfect. And then I flip them around and I do the same thing on the other side, because remember, these are tapered, so this helps to make them nice and even. Just like this, you have a nice little double loop. Look at that, look how neat and clean. Nice for a lobster claw to clip into. It looks a little bit more than just a regular loop. So I snipped that tail off. We're gonna nudge it in. Again, it's super important that we don't have anything sharp sticking out. There we go. Now you can see the base of our bracelet has been made. Just like that, nice and clean, and with just some chain, our clasp, and some wire that we had hanging around. All right, so now let's get to the fun part, which is designing of our decorative elements. So we have head pins here for our bicones, and we have jump rings for our hearts. So for the jump rings, if you've never opened a jump ring before, there is, believe it or not, a right and wrong way. You want to get your pair of pliers in each hand. Again, 2 pairs that have flat, smooth edges inside. Ideally 2 chain nose and flat nose, flat nose and flat nose. Whatever you have lying around will work, but these will be easiest because of that tapered point. You're going to go and grab the jump ring from both sides with that opening there right at the top, and you're going to just swivel it open. Now it's important, that swiveling, because you never want to open a jump ring like this, because right where my thumbs are down here, that will eventually get weak and break. You always want to swivel and your jump ring will remain a lot stronger. Okay, and you don't have to open it up a ton, just enough where you can get it threaded through your little pendant here. Now, let's talk about some design things. So I'm using Swarovski crystal hearts here. And you'll notice when I closed it, I rocked it back and forth a little bit. That helps me to get a nice good join here. You don't want to feel any sharp edges. Nice and smooth. Although actually it would be helpful if I put it back on my chain, wouldn't I? So let me open that back up again. Oops. Flying crystals and jump rings, ladies and gentlemen. You are not the only ones that it happens to. So we're going to be using 5 of these hearts, which means we're going to have 1 in the center. And I'll talk about those design changes in just a second. So we're going to get this bracelet closed so we can determine more easily where our center is. No more flying crystals. All right, so we're about right here. There we go. Now let's get our heart. So you can either put your heart on your jump ring first and then thread your jump ring through your bracelet, or you can thread your jump ring through your bracelet and then put the heart on. It doesn't really matter. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But let's get this closed now that it's actually on the bracelet. I know that is something that we probably all do. You intend to open something and attach it to something else, and then you open it and you just close it. So I think all of us beaders have those great little moments that we can all relate to. So now that I have the first heart on, let's talk about some design things. So with the hearts, it is a bit Valentine's-y, but hey, who doesn't love hearts all year round? But with the addition of that pink, definitely, like I said, a very romantic color scheme. But you can use any pendant you want here. So if you go and check out our website, we have a lot of beautiful crystals that can all work in this capacity, as this focal. And you just want about 5 of them. Or I like an odd number because that way you have 1 in the center. Remember, our bicones are sort of our secondary element. It's the hearts that we're going to be working with first and featuring. So I do like an odd number. So we'll end up having hearts spaced about like that. But you can put anything you want there. So another way that you could make this a much more versatile design for all year round, or depending on whatever year you want to wear it, or whatever part of the year you want to wear it, check out our 8mm round crystals or 8mm bicones. And those are just a hair smaller than these hearts. And they're also going to give you endless color options to have in the place of these 5 hearts here, but will give you a similar look as far as the design of having 5 larger things featured with something smaller here in between them. So definitely check out the 8mm bicones and the 8mm round crystals by Swarovski that we have on eurekacrystalbeads.com, and you will see that you have a ton of fun options. And then if you pair it with a 6mm bicone, we have a whole bunch of those as well. Or if you want something that looks a little more dainty, you can go with a 4mm crystal, or you can stay big and you can just do all 8mm, 10mm, and you can have this be beautiful and chunky. But the basic concepts we're working with here, the basic techniques, you just change out the beads and you can get a lot of different looks and color schemes, but using the same techniques that we're using here. So while this one I love for Valentine's Day, you can make the same bracelet with the same techniques and have it look beautiful for the holidays. You can have it look beautiful for the springtime or Easter with pastel colors. You can go to town with this one. And these are really good techniques to learn. And you'll get a lot of different looks with the same things that you've learned here with this bracelet. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of those hearts on, and then we will move on to talking about adding on our bicones. So I'll be back in just a minute. All right, I've added on my hearts, and one thing I did decide to do with my very last heart, the 6th heart, this particular heart is sold in packages of 3, so I did have one left over, is I decided to add it towards the clasp area, which I think is a beautiful thing to do because clasp areas can look a bit mechanical or plain or boring, but there's no reason you can't jazz them up a bit. So I added in that 6th heart right over there near the clasp. And this is what we have here. Now, something I want to talk about as far as the spacing here. I know I mentioned earlier that I really love Rolo chain because it helps with spacing, and I'm going to show you why. The links go one of 2 ways. So the way I'm looking at that chain here, I can look through every other link, and then the other links in between them, I'd have to turn the bracelet a quarter turn to see through. This makes it really easy to figure out your spacing. So all I did was I have 4 links in between my hearts that are the links I can look through. Show you that a little bit more up closely. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 links in between. And then on the link after and the link before, that are the links we can look through. That's where I have my hearts. So you'll notice that my hearts are going to nicely sit dangling in the same direction because they're both hanging from links that are in the direction you can look through, and they're both on the bottom side of those links. That makes it really easy to make sure that all of your dangles, whether on a bracelet or especially crucial on a necklace, are all dangling and sitting in the nicest way possible. And this also helps you with spacing because when you count the links in between the dangles, you only have to count every other link to make it a little bit easier. So it goes a little faster because you can just deal with counting the links that you can see through, at least with the whatever view you're looking at there. So again, I do have that last 6th heart up there at the clasp as one little extra accent, but otherwise even this alone is a beautiful bracelet. So if you do craft shows or anything like that, this is a really lovely sort of cost-effective bracelet that you can sell with minimal labor. And also if you're thinking summer, make that chain a little longer and you have a really stunning anklet design that will look absolutely beautiful on your beachy vacation, or even your backyard staycation. If you just want to hang out by the kiddie pool, you will look beautiful with this around your ankle as well. So that's another nice idea. But we're going to keep going and we're going to jazz it up a little bit more. We're going to use 1-inch head pins here to add on our 6mm bicones. And again, like I said before, you can play with this, play with color, play with size, play with the amount that you use, and you're going to get a lot of different options. One of the things I really like about teaching is making sure that people understand that with these techniques, you can do so many different things and get a lot of different results by just playing and experimenting with sizes and amounts and spacing. But you didn't really have to learn anything new to do that. So I'm sticking my 6mm bicone onto my head pin here. And we're going to be rolling loops. Now, many times I do like to wrap loops like I did when I attached our clasp, but we were using a thinner piece of wire. These head pins are much thicker and they're very strong, so we don't have to wrap them. And they're nice and short too, so they're an inexpensive head pin to use. You're not going to have much waste left over. So I'm going to grab with my chain nose a little right above my bicone. I'm not going to grab so close that I'm touching the bicone. I want my bicone to be able to wiggle up and down just a little bit. And the reason for that is because if I go so close that I'm touching my bicone, when I go to bend this wire, I'm probably going to crack the top of my bicone. So you want to allow a little bit of wiggle room there, so that way when you go to bend it, there's no cracking. And then after you make that bend, your bicone can't really wiggle up and down too much anymore. And if it can a little bit, that's okay. So now we're going to cut some of this head pin off. And it's more important to focus on what you're leaving behind and less what you're cutting off. You're cutting it off. You don't have to worry about that. What we're going to be working with is what's left behind. So that's most important. Snip this off. And now we're going to use our round nose pliers and we're going to roll a loop. This does take practice, mainly because based on the length of wire here, and based on the type of pliers you have, these round nose pliers, yours could be more petite than mine. Mine could be thicker than yours. So if I were to hold halfway down my pliers, if your pliers are a little different, halfway might not work. So it'll take a little bit of trial and error with your own pliers. But you're going to start to just roll a loop. Bring your wrist back so it's comfortable again, and continue rolling that loop. And after a while, when it's mostly closed, I like to grab closer to the tip of that wire and then guide it shut from there. You get a nice little loop. Now, if your loop is a little, so this one's not bad, but it is going a little bit off to the side. All you have to do is grab it with your flat nose pliers or your chain nose pliers and just straighten it up. Nice and easy. Now we're going to open up this loop. You might think, well, why did we just close it if we're going to open it up? Because we wanted to close it completely to perfectly form that loop. Now that we're going to open it similarly to the jump rings by swiveling it open to the side. Just like that. Now, placement, where you want these little bicones to dangle from. So I think I'm going to do something that looks a little bit more clustery around the hearts. So I'm going to put one on either side of the next. So if your heart is right here on that link, if you look 2 links away is the next link that you can look through. And then on the other side, 2 links away, 1, 2, and you have the next link that you can look through. That's where I'm going to put my little dangles, one on either side of the heart. And you're going to swivel it back shut. Again, you've made your round shape. We're done with our round pliers. Everything else for gripping or opening is going to be with our chain nose. And that's what we got. We have a little bicone on the side of the heart. Now I'm going to go ahead and put these other bicones on following the same exact steps, and I'll be back in a minute to show you how it ends up. All right, so I got the rest of my bicones on. You can see they nicely flank each of the hearts. I also threw a last bicone up here near the clasp on the opposite side as the heart, just again to add a little bit of an accent to that clasp area. But I think this really turned out lovely. And again, just swap out those hearts for anything you want. We have hearts in other colors. We have hearts in other sizes. Or if you don't want to use hearts at all, use these same techniques and throw on some different focal beads there instead. Have fun with the sizes of your bicones. Have fun with all of it. We also have this chain in other colors. We have it in gold. We have it in gunmetal, brass. We have even in matte silver, which would add a beautiful modern look to this bracelet as well. That is what we got, folks. So that's your basic techniques, your basic design, and then just play with it if you'd like. But I think this is a beautiful romantic look for Valentine's Day, and I hope you guys loved it. So thanks for watching. Make sure to visit us on over at EurekaCrystalBeads.com for everything I used in this video, and hopefully we can satisfy all of your beading and jewelry needs. Bye. See you next time.